Welcome into a special Inside Carolina sort of on location here at the indoor facility. Bill Belichick and the Tar Heels kickoff training camp today, August 2nd. Started out first thing in the morning at 8:30 with a press conference from Coach Belichick. And Jeremiah, let's kind of start there. I thought, a lot of people talk about Belichick doesn't give you much. I thought he was pretty good today. He answered a lot of questions, pointed out there were a lot of great questions asked, and he offered a lot of insight into this program. Your thoughts there? I mean, it's the start of camp, so everything's happy, everything's exciting, but
Yeah, for sure. I think for me, going off of what you said, since we're getting closer to the season at this point, I think there's more that these guys just know about their team. Now, maybe not the on-field makeup, because obviously today was the first day of practice, but they know more about their roster and the moving parts. One thing that he was talking about was the scholarship counts as well. Somebody was asking him about the 105, and he was talking about how, their original plans maybe stay under there, but some of the guys might be grandfathered in from last year, so it might be over that count. I was actually asking about the starting quarterback, because obviously last year it was a race between Max Johnson, Connor Harrell. This year they have an influx of new guys as well, and I was hey, is it a week before the season or is it the day before the first game? And he was talking about wanting to take the time to really choose and make that decision and everything like that. So he definitely gave some good answers. He's also talking about his transfer portal strategy as well. The first part, or the initial winter portal, was more so about getting guys on the team, getting guys to fill out the roster. The spring was more so about getting the quality players that you need to build out that depth. And so it was good to kind of hear him talk about those things a little bit. For the most part, there's several, I guess, ways in which he may speak in generalities and speak in a kind of a broad view, but I did think, like you said, he was able to hone in on a few specific topics today.
yeah, the interesting talk and what to talk about fall camp will be or training camp will be is the starting quarterback. And out here today, we watched Max Johnson, Gio Lopez, Bryce Baker, Arturi Newkirk out there, and a couple others. Newkirk has got some height to him, but what was interesting out there today is Max Johnson was getting the first reps, if that means anything, but they were all getting quality reps. They were working on footwork, working on making throws under pressure, working on making little screen passes. And one thing, Jeremiah, that I saw, and we're going to have to get used to, and we've talked about it in the spring as it being an issue maybe for Bryce Baker, is they were under center.
Yeah.
Nearly every rep we got to watch in practice. And for folks that don't know, we saw maybe 15 minutes, maybe 20 minutes of practice.
About 20.
The defense is on the far side of the field. The receivers were kind of in front of us. The quarterbacks were back and forth. But working from under center is going to be an interesting take for this team. They are committed to run the football. And he talked about that in the press conference with Freddie Kitchens. And we're seeing it out here today. They're committed to being a tough, physical football team, and we see it day one of practice.
So one thing that Freddie Kitchens even last year was committed to, being the run game coordinator, was establishing some physicality. That's a little bit easier to do when you have Omarion Hampton, who in and of himself is such a physical presence. Now you're going to have to kind of do it by committee, and you're going to have to kind of establish that RB1. But last season, Jacoby Criswell a lot of times played, shotgun, as people noticed. So there wasn't a lot of, under center that you really saw. So now with a new slate of quarterbacks other than really Max Johnson, pretty much starting from scratch, gonna run it from center, gonna take snaps under center. So I do think that'll certainly be an adjustment. It was, me and Adam actually were joking, looking at number 28 out there being Benjamin Hall from Michigan and not, obviously Omarion Hampton. So it's gonna be an adjustment. But yeah, Belichick, like you said, talked about wanting that physicality, talked about wanting to, set the tone. He even said something like, you don't want to get pushed back every play or something like that. So that's kind of the, little, I guess, humor that he likes to throw in from time to time, and little phrases and little expressions. But yeah, and we were seeing some handoff drills out there as well. Like you said, Max Johnson went first in, several drills. You can take it how you want to take it, but there was still, even in that, a good variance of who was handing the ball off to who. So one time I saw, Caleb Hood getting a handoff from Max, and then I saw him getting one from Newkirk. So, they blended it, so not to read too much into it, but yeah, so they're definitely, and like you said, the screen passes, so definitely an emphasis on trying to use the running backs, trying to get them involved this year.
Yeah, this is definitely going to be a more physical football team than we've seen, I think, from North Carolina in a good while. I mean, it's one thing when you have, like you mentioned, Omarion Hampton, he brings physicality by himself.
Yeah.
Obviously, with the stats he put up. I heard one during the program the other night. 2 seasons straight of 1,000 yards after contact.
Insane.
That's ridiculous.
Insane.
And so it's going to be a different animal for North Carolina. You mentioned Benjamin Hall and the other running backs. Caleb Hood looked good, looks healthy.
Yep.
Max Johnson, we'll see if he's a factor getting closer to the season, but he's definitely out here playing.
Yeah.
Newkirk, I mentioned him, Bryce Baker, and also Gio Lopez, a little smaller in stature, but maybe bigger through the body.
Yeah.
One thing they've got to do to be physical on this team, Jeremiah, is the offensive line needs to be physical. And I thought it was interesting. You know, they run the sled drills out here. You had Christo Kelly at center, Blasky at guard, McVay at the right tackle, and then on the other side you had Banfield and Trey Green. Bottom line with that is they've got depth, they've got pieces. Those were the first guys out there today.
Yeah, it's certainly good to have some, returning guys on that line. Obviously, like you mentioned, Blasky, shifting over and everything like that. So, yeah, for them to kind of go first on that initial sled drill, I mean, that's a lineup that makes sense. It's a lineup that has, experience, that has starting experience as well. And like I said, some continuity to it. So all of those things when you talk about, and not only that, but you had a few tight ends over there too. So I remember specifically Connor Cox was over there, and I saw a few other guys over there. So really a, collective effort to bring those tight ends, because again, talking about Freddie Kitchens, those tight ends last year would say a lot of times, if you're not going to be physical, he's not going to put you in the game type situation. So having not only the linemen, but also some of those tight ends in on those sled drills, that was something that stood out to me, especially considering what Bill Belichick was saying about the physicality in the press conference, and obviously, the need to kind of compensate for the loss of Amari Hampton. So it's going to be a group effort, I think, in that regard. And like you said, a lot of new faces in that running back room. So I'm interested to see, who gets what types of reps and who comes in what packages and all of those things.
Again, day one of practice here in a bluster, even though the sun's trying to come out Chapel Hill. Last part of here, and I want to talk about it because it's something we've talked about on the podcast over the offseason, is the receiving room. You've got a bunch of talent. Jordan Shipp has been the guy that's been sort of the alpha in that room.
Yeah.
But you have Alex Taylor was out there. You've got a bunch of new guys.
Yeah.
But something else I thought was interesting, I didn't see Paul Billups out there.
Yeah.
And so that was a notable absence. We don't know what the case is there. But your thoughts there on the receiving room. What I saw here today was a lot of work on route running and blocking. And we've heard all along, if you're not going to block at receiver, you're not going to play. They showed it here in what little bit we got to see. Beating the jams to get off, but mostly blocking. And we didn't see a lot of catching. They don't throw the ball around because they're working on those basic fundamentals.
Yeah, and Sanders is certainly being set. So I'm not going to say any names on here, but Garrett McGee, the wide receivers coach, one of the receivers on one of the routes that they were running, had ran it and, made some sort of technique error on the route. Made him do it again, like immediately, like didn't even hesitate, go ahead, do it again. So it's stuff like that. I think they're trying to really establish that standard, really set the tone of, this is what it looks like. And like you said, not a lot of catching, because when they were running those routes, no one was throwing the footballs because the quarterbacks were still over there with the running backs doing the screen. So there was no one catching the football, obviously in the part that we saw, right? Who knows what they go do over there. But yeah, so really just a lot of it. And it's, congruent with, some of the stuff that Belichick has been saying. A lot of it is, kind of getting the technique down, getting the fundamentals down, really understanding or having the guys understand what they need to, even just get on the field. I think the talent will show. You mentioned, obviously, guys like Jordan Shipp coming back and guys like Alex Taylor, just different guys. We know that they have talent in the room. I think it's really just a matter of what are the small things going to be to kind of get these guys to separate, because for as much talent is coming back, really only Kobe Paysour is your guy, unless I'm, missing someone, off the top of my head. He was really the only guy that was getting, consistent targets or, consistent snaps during games last season. So a lot of these guys, they may have the raw talent, but they still have to prove themselves. And I think that's what a lot of this camp is gonna be.
Yeah, Belichick talked about acclimation period, getting used to it. We saw a lot of that today. They are not going to be out fundamental. They're not going to be out coached, I don't think.
Yeah.
We will see how it all shakes out when it gets down to it. North Carolina, day one fall camp in a 75 rainy day situation here in Chapel Hill, but it's still football, and ball will be here soon enough. September 1st, TCU. That's Jeremiah Holloway. I'm Tommy Ashely. Shout out to Johnny T-Shirt as always for sponsoring us.